New York's beloved hot dogs hide a disturbing reality beneath their iconic status. With vendors paying up to $289,000 yearly for prime locations, many cut corners to stay profitable. The race for cheap ingredients, from stale buns to questionable meat quality, has turned this historic street food into a potential health hazard. The famous dollar dog might cost you more than just pocket change. To understand how we got here, we need to go back in time and uncover how the hot dog became America's most iconic street food in the first place. New York's hot dog story began in the late 1800s when waves of German immigrants brought their homeland's cherished sausage tradition to American shores. But it wasn't just about the food, it was about survival and opportunity. These immigrants discovered that selling sausages in buns was the perfect way to make a living in their new home, offering an affordable meal that working-class New Yorkers could enjoy on the go. In 1867, a German immigrant named Charles Feltman changed the game forever. Starting with just a simple pushcart in Coney Island, he introduced something revolutionary: a warm sausage nestled in a soft roll. It was simple, but it was genius. Workers could grab a quick bite without needing plates or utensils, and at a price that wouldn't empty their pockets. Feltman's little cart became so successful that he eventually expanded into a massive restaurant empire, transforming Coney Island into a hot dog lover's paradise. But the real twist in this story comes from one of Feltman's own employees, Nathan Handworker. In 1916, after learning the ins and outs of the hot dog business, Nathan took a bold risk. He opened his own stand just a few blocks away from Feltman's, but with one crucial difference: his hot dogs cost just 5 cents, half the price of Feltman's. Nathan's Famous was born, and it would go on to become a New York legend. Nathan wasn't just selling hot dogs, he was selling an experience. His secret spice recipe gave the hot dogs a distinctive taste that kept customers coming back for more. But his real masterpiece was the annual 4th of July hot dog eating contest. What started as a simple publicity stunt in 1916 turned into an internationally recognized event that puts Nathan's and New York hot dogs in the global spotlight every year. The hot dog's popularity spread like wildfire across the city. Vendors popped up everywhere, from street corners to baseball stadiums. Famous spots like Gray's Papaya and Papaya King joined the scene, each adding their own twist to the classic dog. These weren't just food stands anymore. They became landmarks, places where tourists and locals alike would gather for a true taste of New York. Today, NYC hot dogs can be found worldwide, with vendors trying to recreate that authentic New York street food experience. But here's where things get interesting and a bit concerning. With the massive competition and sky-high costs of running a hot dog stand in prime locations, vendors are forced to make some tough choices. Think getting into the hot dog business is as simple as buying a cart and some francs? Think again. New York City's hot dog scene is a complex web of expensive licenses, fierce competition, and strict regulations that would make any potential vendor's head spin. Let's talk numbers, and they're not pretty. The city has put a hard cap on hot dog stand licenses at 3,100. That might sound like a lot, but in a city of over 8 million people, these licenses have become more valuable than gold. Some aspiring vendors have waited up to 20 years just to get their hands on one. Yes, you heard that right. 2 decades of waiting just to sell hot dogs. But the real shocker? The price tag on these licenses. If you're dreaming of setting up shop near the Metropolitan Museum of Art or Central Park Zoo, prepare yourself. These prime locations can cost vendors an astronomical $289,000 per year. That's not a typo, nearly $300,000 annually just for the right to sell hot dogs in a good spot. To put that in perspective, that's more than many people's houses cost. Now, not every location demands such eye-watering prices. If you're willing to settle for less foot traffic, you can find licenses for around $700 a year in places like Inwood Hill Park. Sounds better, right? Well, here's the catch. Fewer people means fewer sales, and in the hot dog business, volume is everything. The middle ground isn't much better. Want to sell in Pelham Bay Park? That'll be $1,100 annually. Maria Hernandez Park? $3,200 per year. These bargain locations might seem more reasonable, but they're still a significant investment for someone just starting out. Here's where it gets even more interesting. These licenses aren't just expensive, they're also incredibly competitive. When park permits go up for auction every 5 years, it turns into a bidding war that would make Wall Street traders blush. Vendors often find themselves in brutal competitions, driving prices even higher than the already steep starting bids. The city's strict control over these licenses has created what some might call a monopoly situation. With such limited availability and high demand, getting into the hot dog business has become less about culinary passion and more about having deep pockets or the right connections. But here's the million-dollar question, or should we say, the $289,000 question. How do vendors actually make money with these insane overhead costs? Well, that's where things get really interesting. When you're paying hundreds of thousands just for the right to sell, you've got to get creative with your business model. And by creative, we mean vendors have to find ways to keep their costs as low as possible while selling enough hot dogs to make their investment worthwhile. The answer lies in a fascinating mix of volume sales, razor-thin margins, and strategic pricing that keeps these street food entrepreneurs in business. Let's break down the basic costs. A single hot dog and bun combo costs vendors around 75 cents, while drinks run about 25 cents each. At first glance, these numbers might not seem too bad, but remember, some vendors are paying nearly $300,000 just for their spot on the street. That means they need to sell a lot of hot dogs just to break even. Here's where the math gets interesting. The average customer spends about $4 per visit to a hot dog stand. Now, imagine a busy spot outside Central Park Zoo. If a vendor serves just one customer every 3 minutes, which is actually pretty slow for a prime location, they're looking at around $840 per day. Stretch that across a year, and you're talking about $300,000 in revenue. Bump that up to one customer every 2 minutes, and suddenly that vendor could be pocketing a profit of $150,000 annually. But there's a catch, and it's a big one. These calculations assume perfect conditions, good weather, steady customer flow, and no equipment breakdowns. Reality isn't usually that kind. Vendors face brutal summer heat, freezing winters, rainy days that kill foot traffic, and the constant threat of equipment malfunctions. Every day without sales is still a day they're paying for that expensive license. This pressure to make money creates a troubling dynamic. To maximize profits, some vendors look for ways to cut costs even further. Maybe they're buying lower quality hot dogs in bulk. Perhaps they're stretching their supplies longer than they should. Some might even be tempted to ignore proper food storage temperatures to avoid waste. After all, when you're paying hundreds of thousands for a license, throwing away unsold hot dogs feels like throwing away pure profit. The most successful vendors have turned hot dog selling into a precise science. They know exactly when to stock up, how many hot dogs to prepare during different times of day, and how to price their products just right. They've mastered the delicate balance between keeping prices low enough to attract customers, but high enough to cover their massive overhead costs. But this raises an uncomfortable question. In this high-pressure environment where every penny counts, what corners are being cut? When vendors are forced to choose between making their license payments and buying premium ingredients, which do you think they choose? The disturbing reality is that the hot dog in your hand might be telling a story of compromise, one that could affect more than just your wallet. When you're grabbing a quick hot dog from a street vendor, you're probably not thinking about food safety. But maybe you should be. With vendors under intense pressure to maximize profits, some disturbing practices have become all too common on New York streets. Let's start with what you can see, or rather, what you should be watching for. Have you ever noticed how some hot dog buns seem unusually firm? That's not artisanal bread you're biting into, it's staleness. When buns develop more snap than the hot dogs themselves, it's a red flag that vendors might be using old supplies to save money. But stale bread is just the beginning of your worries. The hot dogs themselves can tell an even more troubling story. Vendors are supposed to maintain their hot dogs at safe temperatures in clean, regularly changed water. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That water often sits there all day, becoming a warm breeding ground for bacteria. Even more concerning is when hot dogs start changing colors. If your frank looks whitish when served, but then turns red or vice versa, you're not witnessing a magic trick. You're seeing signs of old meat that's been sitting out far too long. The toppings bar can be another danger zone. Those dried out onions and questionable sauces sitting in the summer heat, They're supposed to be kept at specific temperatures and replaced regularly. But when every replacement means eating into already thin profit margins, some vendors stretch their supplies well beyond safe limits. Dry, crusty onions aren't just unappetizing, they're a sign that food safety isn't a top priority at that stand. Here's something that might surprise you. Hot dog carts often operate with less oversight than traditional restaurants. While restaurants face regular health inspections and strict compliance requirements, street vendors can sometimes fly under the radar. This reduced supervision, combined with the pressure to maintain profits under expensive licensing costs, creates a perfect storm for food safety shortcuts. The risks aren't just theoretical. Food poisoning from street vendors is more common than you might think, but it often goes unreported. Most people who get sick from a street hot dog will blame it on something else they ate, or they'll suffer through it without reporting it. This lack of reporting means the true scale of the problem remains hidden from official statistics. Temperature control is another critical issue. Hot dogs need to be kept at specific temperatures to prevent bacterial growth. But on a sweltering New York summer day, when the cart's cooling system is fighting against 90-degree heat, or during a busy rush when the lid is constantly being opened, maintaining safe temperatures becomes a challenge. And remember, every time a vendor throws away food that's been in the danger zone too long, that's profit going in the trash. Think about that the next time you see a hot dog that's been sitting in cloudy water for who knows how long, but don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. There are still places in New York where you can get a safe, quality hot dog. The trick is knowing where to look. First up, let's talk about the basics of spotting a good vendor. A clean cart isn't just about appearances, it's your first clue about how seriously a vendor takes food safety. Look for stands that gleam in the sunlight, where the surfaces are wiped down regularly, and where the vendor wears clean gloves that they change frequently. If the cart looks like it hasn't seen soap and water since the Yankees' last World Series win, keep walking. Your nose knows best when it comes to hot dog stands. A good cart should smell appetizing, like grilled meat and warm buns. If you catch a whiff of anything funky, that's your cue to move on. Those strange odors could be coming from old water in the hot dog warmer or spoiled toppings, and neither belongs in your lunch. Here's a pro tip. Busy stands are usually safer stands. High customer turnover means fresh ingredients and regular food rotation. When hot dogs are flying off the grill every few minutes, they're not sitting around growing bacteria. Plus, popular stands can afford to maintain higher standards because they're actually making money. If you want guaranteed quality, head to established spots like Gray's Papaya or Papaya King. These New York institutions have built their reputations over decades, serving consistently good hot dogs in clean environments. Central Park vendors, away from the overpriced tourist traps, often offer solid options too as they face regular health inspections to maintain their expensive licenses. For a reliable hot dog experience, check out designated food truck parks or food cart zones. These areas are typically well regulated, and vendors must follow strict health codes. Plus, the competition keeps everyone on their toes. One bad review can ruin a business in these spots. Remember, a great New York hot dog isn't just about the taste, it's about enjoying this iconic street food without worrying about spending the next day regretting your choices. With these tips in mind, you can confidently grab a dog from the right vendor and experience a true bite of New York City culture safely and deliciously.